Hello everyone, welcome back for some more Let's Read Fate Requiem. So, I thought this chapter ended a bit weirdly because it just ended on such a cliffhanger that wasn't really like a thing. Hey, remember when there was that one random page thrown in? Yeah, it was this one. So, we need to actually finish the chapter before moving on to the next one. So, let's get going for that. Really embarrassing. But it is what it is. Y'all know how hard it is to get these put into reading format for these, so it's fine. It's no worries there. But anyways, an unexpected voice called me to a halt. Reese, we need to talk. It's important. So I'm gonna go to my bookmark, which I went to here, because this was it. Remember, it was like 46 to then 146. So here we are. It was the first time I had seen Miss Fujimura in several days. Well, there we go. I wheeled around to find her standing in the dimly lit outer hall dressed like a librarian as always. Don't know if I would call that dressing like a librarian, but okay. Why is she here? What could she possibly want to talk about? I strode towards her with the intention of grilling her on the events in Shibuya and Shinjuku. As I opened my mouth, I heard an odd sound from the broadcast. As the camera focused on the Carthaginian flagship, the witch performing the commentary had yelped in shock. I spun around to look. Miss Fujimura, too, focused on the screen. What I saw defied comprehension. Regardless of the fact that the enemy was still distant, Hannibal, the Carthaginian commander, whipped his blade from his sheath at his belt and without a moment's hesitation thrust it deep into the chest of his second-in-command, El Cid. Gah! El Cid's face froze in an expression of disbelief. His master rounded on Hannibal in his confusion. The Carthaginian pulled his blood-stained sword from his ally's chest, and without a care for the man's protests, swung his massive sword crosswise in a vicious slash. Both El Cid and his master collapsed. The two heads flew from the boat to splash down unceremoniously into the artificial sea. Oh, yeah, that's, if we didn't read that, that'd be confusing. Oh boy. Let's go back to that other one there. Yeah, then yay! Happy times. Wow. That's even... Okay, considering that's where the picture would have taken place, that's even worse. Alright, well. Here we are with Chapter 5. Terror flooded the Colosseum like a breaking wave. First, quietly, an almost imperceptible swell, but then gradually escalating into a furious, all-devouring surge. Astonishment was plain to see on every face, but it came in different shades. Some spectators interpreted Hannibal's betrayal as all part of a cruel act, and cheered all the louder. They couldn't even imagine that a servant could have truly killed a human. I found it almost impossible to believe myself, all the more so that I had met the servant in question not a few days ago. Struggling for words, the witch vainly tried to continue her commentary, but that too ceased. News of the incidents in other wards had spread throughout the crowd, and no small number of spectators had already been making to leave. Their presence in the stairwells spurred others who had only been watching into a rush for the exits. Watching from a distance through a monitor, as I was, I managed to maintain some degree of composure. The spectators in the arena were quickly swept up in the panic of those around them. Oh man, reading's real tough right now. Miss Fujimura spoke calmly, steadily, as though this were just another lecture. We must keep cool heads, Aris. I've already notified security, and they should begin the evacuations shortly. The rest of the Karen series is attending to the incidents in other wards. You're evacuating? But the panic I had feared was already beginning to spread. The analysis channels broadcast an evacuation message, and monitors all across the arena had switched to a static screen informing spectators that the match had been suspended. The battleground had descended into a full-on melee, spilling across both lines of ships. One of the rocky islands thrust skyward, and the water level suddenly plummeted. No. As I watched, another master vanished beneath the feet of one of Hannibal's elephants. A second victim. A servant sprinted towards them, tragically a few seconds too late, vanished in a burst of golden dust. Who was that? I couldn't see. It wasn't her, was it? Some losses must be expected given the present situation. I'm attempting to contact the surviving masters to enlist their cooperation in bringing it under control, but around half are unresponsive. You mean because of Hannibal? No. I gulped. Did it mean that it was Hannibal's master who was responsible? No, that couldn't be right. It didn't make any sense. Did you know this was going to happen, Miss Fujimura? She shook her head sadly. No. Among all conceivable scenarios, I discarded this one as highly improbable. Even the Holy Grail, in all its omnipotence, did not have the means to prepare for every possible eventuality. She had undoubtedly done all that she could, where she could, and now lamented it had not been enough. Fiercely, bitterly. Regret churned beneath her cool, calm exterior. I forced myself to ignore it. Right now, I needed to be the Reaper. I'd made preparations in Shinjuku, but it seems I've been taken unawares. In the name of Karen Fujimura, Municipal Administration AI of Mosaic City, I've invoked Code Crimson. That sounds cool. Code Crimson. The Scarlet Summons. I knew what it meant. It was Mosaic City's highest threat level. To the best of my knowledge, it had only been invoked once since the restructuring of Akihabara. Are you capable of distinguishing servants from ordinary citizens, Aris? Of course, better than any... Good. Your task is to eliminate any and all hostile servants on the premises. The security forces alone will not be sufficient. I shivered, both at the joy of the request I had been so long waiting for, and with fear at the nature of what was being asked of me. Unilateral elimination was a highly unorthodox measure to take. If the situation hadn't been so dire, I doubt Miss Fujimura would have even considered it. Do you mean every single one? Across the whole Colosseum? Wherever you suspect hostile intent, you may engage at your own discretion. Noted. One last question, Miss Fujimura. Is this a mission for the Reaper? No. This is a personal request for Utsumi Eris. Understood. I won't let you down. She knew that she was directly contradicting Chitose's restrictions, and she was doing it anyway. Just that was enough for me. I'm afraid there is something else I need to take care of, Miss Fujimura said. You require no further direction, I trust? I nodded confidently, and just like that, we parted ways. Now it is time to get to work. I embraced them. Loathsome spirits, vile spirits, evil spirits all. I turned none away, as I would for a dear friend. I embraced their rage, their sorrow, and their terror. I made it all for part of me. I steadied my breathing as I drew closer to the edge of the passage. The sounds of battle echoed from beyond. With each swish of my arms, deep crimson blood splattered across the ground. I let it flow as I ran onward. Miss Fujimura had charged me with eliminating all servants, and I knew all too well what that meant. The first thing I made out was a group of spectators jostling with each other at the bottom of the ramp leading to the audience seats. One of them, a man, was lashing out at the rest with wild abandon, his frenzied clawing and scratching sufficient to draw blood. Despite his contemporary clothing, I could immediately tell that he was a servant. As I watched, it began to dissolve into mana. It was the mana it was woven from, revealing medieval garments underneath. Armed security personnel tore him from the spectators, dragged him to the ground, and loosened a barrage of rounds into him from the bullpup-type handguns. He was weak for a servant, weak enough that ordinary humans could engage with him without much difficulty. However, the thaumaturgically enhanced bullets pierced straight through him to ricochet to the hard floor, leaving him relatively unharmed. Only a little worse than wear for the hail of bullets, he rose to his feet once more and lunged at a nearby citizen. Nearby, a hysterical woman tried desperately to control him with her command seals, but even with direct orders to stop, did nothing to dissuade him, and he showed no sign of being willing to revert to spiritual form. This is even worse than Hannibal. It's like he lost his mind entirely. I checked whether the classification tag I had received from my master for use within the Colosseum was properly attached, then gestured to the security personnel. They checked me and then immediately fell back obediently. I extended a branch. The defiled blood pouring forth from the evil spirits of my arm coagulated and flowed outward, forming a dark black branch that shone with dull luster. It extended from my fingertip with incredible speed as though growing organically. Easily, so easily, it pierced the servant's external barrier. It tore ravenously around his insides and searched for his spiritual core, and that located, seized his Saint Graph and wrested it violently from his body. Oh my god. Did she just like Zandatsu the servant? A servant's spirit graph was their center, their heart, their CPU. It dictated every function. Rendered temporarily visible, it shone in vibrant hues, only vaguely to ordinary citizens but more clearly to magi. It differed from person to person. The servant clutched for his stolen heart. Oh man, why can't I read today? Gasping bestially as he tried in vain to return it to his body. I could sense nothing higher from him than his most primal instincts. A woman suddenly lunged for me from the side, the same woman who had been so desperately trying to stop the servant with her command seals. "What are you doing? Stop it," I said. "Stop! Don't you understand he's my servant?" "I'm sorry," I said. It was all I could offer. I could not ignore any servant who presented a danger to those around him. Squeezing the life from a human's neck or gouging out their eyes would present little difficulty for even the weakest of them. Deprived of his Saint Graph, the servant finally lost his strength to maintain his corporeal form and dissolved into colorless mana. "I'm sorry," I repeated. "Please, evacuate as you have been instructed." "Just stop this," she implored. "Please, stop, just stop." The command seals were already beginning to fade from the back of her hand. I was under no illusions about the sense of loss she must be experiencing. She sank to the ground, her body racked with sobs. I managed to haul her to her feet and handed her to security personnel. I stared at the Saint Graph, now stripped of its vessel, clutched in the end of my branch. As I watched, it blackened, becoming one with the blood that held it. The deceased servant had not returned to the throne of heroes. Oh? Oh. Once his master's wounded heart healed, the Grail would summon a new servant for her, and her command seals would recover. All would be well, so long as the Grail continued to function, although even if by some miracle it were to summon the same servant, his memories would not be preserved. Oh, okay, I was wondering, do these people, when they lose their servant, do they no longer have a servant? But no. It seems that they will always get a servant, but by doing this, it doesn't go back to the throne, which means it does. Oh, okay. Oh boy. In the time it had taken me to attend to this one servant, the hall had begun to fill with evacuating spectators. I connected the security network in search for one of my next targets as I forced my way through the tide. Over the next few minutes, I eliminated several servants with hardly a moment in between. All had lost their reason and became little more than animals. My branch punctured their bodies and ripped out their Saint Graphs without mercy or quarter. Really wonder what when it says branch, it makes it like I'm imagining this looking like the dude from Prototype, like with the crazy arm claw kind of, but like made out of blood, like the black sort of blood, right? I don't know. Huh. My branch punctured their bodies and ripped out the Saint Graphs without mercy or quarter. One master, a man, resisted particularly vigorously and gave me a punch to the face and a split lip for my trouble. Taking the blow, I reasoned, was the quickest method of quelling his anger. I disliked pain as much as the next person, but I was capable of accepting it when I had to. Seeing me continue to urge him to evacuate in spite of the punch, he returned to his senses, blanched, and sheepishly apologized. The servant I had eliminated had been a young woman, a wisp of a thing barely even there. She had not made for difficult work. Now my mouth tastes like blood. This is the worst. I felt the evil spirit's excitement heighten even further. If an ordinary 14-year-old girl with no training had taken a punch like that, she would have dropped on the spot, unconscious or comatose. Unfortunately, I was permitted no such reprieve. It would require more than that to take me out of commission. The servant's appearance and reactions had not given me any clues as to her identity. I briefly wondered who she had been. I was well aware that many servants summoned nowadays were lesser known, but I still felt ashamed of my ignorance. Oh, but man, you feel ashamed at not knowing who some of these servants are? Try being me and being like, I don't know who half these dudes are. I would have to study harder. Yo, me too. In time, a new servant would appear before the man who had been her master and heal him from his grief, just like all the masters before him I'd clashed with as a reaper. But I had to wonder, what happens to those servants who pass on forgotten? I remembered them, always. I had to. Even if they left behind no other proof that they had lived here in Mosaic City, that proof was here within me, carved into my own heart. As I eliminated servant after berserk servant, I began to notice a peculiarity about them. More and more reports of servants being successfully pacified began to filter through the security network. They were vicious and hostile, certainly, but their savagery was not directed as one would expect of a servant with a clear grievance. They had not fallen into a state of violent insanity like berserkers on the battlefield, and could be dealt with by keeping them at a safe distance from others and restraining them with a spiritual isolation net. I had also been keeping an ear open for any reports of the walking corpses left behind by the command seal hunter that had been widely reported throughout the other wards, but as of yet, only one had been discovered on the grounds of the colosseum. However, even as the security personnel began restraining the errant servants, so too did the number of affected servants grow. Every time one servant went berserk, 3 more cases would emerge in their vicinity a scant few minutes later. It was almost as though the insanity was transmitting through contact between their spiritual forms, spreading like a disease. I began to hear the same words uttered over and over, a burgeoning whisper from security officers and civilians alike. They're almost like voodoo zombies. It can't be necromancy. We'd be looking at physical bodies walking around, not spiritual ones. Is it even possible to make zombies out of spiritual entities? If the goal behind this seizing control of the zombified servants was seizing control of the zombified servants from their masters, there were far more efficient ways to do it. If it was to turn them into some purpose, the chaotic results hardly justified the sophistication of the method. It's like who's ever behind this doesn't have any other objective beyond spreading death. The sounds of battle resounded intermittently from the direction of the arena, sounds of raw destruction that could only have been born of a battle between servants. I wondered what could be happening there, on the battlefield still half submerged in water. The surviving security cam feeds hadn't furnished me with any details. A mighty impact rocked the Colosseum with a loud bang, followed by an electrical crackling as the remaining interior lights shut down. The emergency generator in the security's network mainframe must have fallen, victim to some attack or other. Robbed of any other means of communication, the security personnel resorted to physically shouting to each other. A large number of the interior exits had either collapsed or become blocked by other debris. On seeing the path had become impassable, evacuating spectators tried to return the way they had come, only to have to fight through the rest of the crowd pushing from behind them, and the evacuation quickly fell into confusion. Those servants who had escaped infection, for the time being, remained cool and collected, and were cooperating with those around them while protecting their masters. However, in the state of confusion and panic, some evacuees even resorted to reckless actions in hopes of forcing those servants to prioritize protecting them instead. Someone needs to take command here. Where's Miss Fujimura? Where's my master? About 20 minutes had passed since the suspension of the match, and the chaos was reaching its peak, when I spotted a familiar face. What are you doing here? Kron stood like a statue in the middle of the crowd of fleeing spectators. Karine and Koyu were nowhere to be seen. Did you come here all by yourself? You need to find Karine and get out of... He blithely ignored me. It was a dog. What do you mean a dog? It was calling me. Time to waste wondering what he was getting at was a luxury I didn't have. I hurriedly dialed Karine's number, but the call showed no sign of deigning to connect. The branch drooping from my arm came close to brushing him. You can't be here right now, okay? Can't be near me, it's not safe. I backed away from him, bumping into evacuating spectators as I retreated into the shadows of the corridor. We stay together. That's what you said. Even in the midst of the chaos, I could still clearly make out his voice. I know, but... He stared up at me with a frail, quizzical expression. You're gonna cry, I know it. I started. For a moment, I could have slapped him for real. Oh, did he say it to... Wait, he said that to... Oh, he said that to her. Okay. Karine and Koyu were doubtlessly out there somewhere, risking their lives searching for him, and here he was mocking me. The evil spirit stirred eagerly, feeding on the dark flame of anger that had flared in my breast. Control yourself, Aris. I could not allow my frustration to get the better of me. Maybe so. You're right. I'm sorry. I admitted it, my voice shaking. I wanted to cry more than anything, but what good would it do anyone now? More to the point, Why were my innermost thoughts and feelings such an open book to this child? And why could I not accept him, even though I could open myself up to far viler spirits so easily? A sudden sea change came across the milling crowd. Now, all at once, they were running in one direction away from something. The churning pond became a surging wave, with pure terror written upon every one of its myriad faces. It must be him. The servant who followed them had clearly lost his mind. I recognized him from his thin, light armor and his distinctive bulk, like a heavyweight wrestler. This man stood on deck with the Ottomans. I knew him to be one of the clan leaders from the Matsuura League, an alliance of Japanese feudal warlords from in and around the Matsuura county of Nagasaki, famed for their naval prowess. They had fought both at Dano-ura and against the subsequent Mongol invasions. It would be no exaggeration to say that they helped to shape Japanese history as we knew it, and he was one of their greatest warriors. His naked blade was slick with innocent blood. Not a trace of his strategist's cunning remained in his eyes. His master was nowhere to be seen. Can't watch this. The least I can do is put him out of his misery. It would not be easy. He may have lost his mind, but he was positively bursting with mana. The innumerable bullet holes that peppered his body began to fill even as I watched. If he unleashed his noble phantasm here, the casualties would be unimaginable. Did I miss a page? No, okay, we're just jumping right ahead, huh? Dang. I couldn't afford to hold back, but my thoughts jumped to the child behind me. My powers were a threat to every servant in the vicinity, not just my target. Was I really so confident I could control them? Get back, please! A female voice rang out from above me, sharp and clear. I looked up to see a girl sprinting along one of the upper corridors, closely pursuing a servant. She vaulted the railing and flung herself into the open space. Is that Koharu? Her white coat flapped wildly as she began her inexorable 15-meter plummet to the ground, and then her diminutive body was eclipsed by Galahad's lanky frame as he materialized. The Knight of the Grail wrapped an arm around his master's waist with an exasperated sigh. The pair spun in midair as they fell, and as I watched, an extraordinary change came over them. Two people, master and servant, had leapt from the upper corridor. By the time they landed on the floor below, they had become one, a woman clad in armor of deep indigo. The same knight, brave and bold, with whom I had once seen on the enormous TV screen in Akihabara. That's it. Her possession, it must be. I had never imagined I would witness it quite like this. The Matsuura warlord didn't even afford her the opportunity to recover from her fall. She took the blow from a low-slung stance with her own sword. Koharu, that's you, right? It is. In her possessed state, Koharu stood taller than me. She had two swords, very much like Galahad's pair, at her belt. The one currently in her hand was a longsword of curious design, with two pieces of ribbon-like cloth trailing from the hilt, while the other still rested in its scabbard and had yet to see use. He's not going to stop her, Reese, not until his safegraph is destroyed. So it seems, I managed. So I've decided. Her blade danced as she spoke, blocking the Matsuura warlord's weighty swings. I can't just give the order to Galahad and be done with it. If I'm going to kill him, it's only right to do it myself. With my own hands. The two warriors gripped their swords in both hands and exchanged a flurry of blows in a shower of sparks. The warlord made to pull back, to open some distance between them, and Koharu seized the chance to press all the harder. Her opponent was her better in sheer strength, but with his every wild slash, her blade licked silently and inexorably, they keep using that word, closer to his neck. As I watched, spellbound, cracks spread out across the concrete floor beneath them with a sharp snapping sound. Despite the warlord's furious snarl, he was powerless to stop what was coming. He writhed like a trapped beast as his doom crept closer and closer, until at last Koharu's blade sliced his throat open in a crimson torrent. I owe him that much. She curtly flicked the blood from her sword, painting a scarlet arc across the floor. Then, with nothing so much as bitter remorse in her eyes, she drove the blade through the spine of her twitching foe. She had dispatched him with ease, without even needing to draw her second sword. Facing her on dry land, the warlord of the Matsuura League had been hopelessly outmatched. As I confirmed the destruction of his saint graph, a small figure wandered out from the cover of the shadows to squat down and survey the aftermath of the battle. The bloodstains were already beginning to disappear. Kran? He stared avidly at the gruesome spectacle as though burning it into his mind. His gaze was now as fierce as any he had directed at any street performer's work. Koharu and I told each other what we knew. If the situation hadn't been so pressing, I would have jumped at the chance to grill her on the details of her possession. What effects did it have on our body? Could she still hear and talk to Galahad? But now was most definitely not the time. No, it was someone different I was chasing. A magic user, working alone. A magic user. Apparently she had come from the arena hot on the trail of the very unknown foe I was after. The one who had incapacitated Hannibal, his master, and most of the other capable servants in the arena. The infected exhibit drastic degeneration of the mental faculties and indiscriminate hostility toward anything around them, while the infection itself appears capable of propagating among spiritual entities. I've never seen any magecraft quite like this. Ghouls, perhaps? Or maybe some subspecies of minor vampire? I can think of one thing that could do this. You've probably heard of it too, but it couldn't be real. It was the stuff of fiction, of cheap popcorn thrillers. It had begun with fanciful folk tales that spoke of using the dead as mindless slaves, before they were warped and twisted by the age of slavery to become... zombies? Do you mean voodoo magic? That kind that even children know of? No matter how much older she had appeared to have grown, the expression of childish surprise was the Koharu I knew. After the death of El Cid and his master, the arena fell into chaos. We could no longer tell our allies from our enemies, so we elected to put some distance between us. I've yet to encounter any of my allies, but the infection is spread among their rank. The harm that they could inflict would be grievous indeed. This colosseum would be the least of our concerns. With Galahad possessing her, Koharu was no longer merely human, not quite a servant. She hovered somewhere in between. Your possession should keep you safe from the infection, shouldn't it? I would like to hope so, but I would prefer to err on the side of caution. More importantly, Aris, that blood on your arm is no mere wound, is it? No, it's... I felt a pair of young eyes on me even as I answered, burning into me reproachfully. This is nothing but poison to servants. You shouldn't come close, just in case. Understood, she nodded. Another question came, this time from Pran. Are you gonna do more killing now? If I have to. Is that because it's war? Not a flicker of fear crossed his face as he tottered toward me. He stood on tiptoes to stretch out his hand to caress my swollen cheek, as though he were no longer satisfied with just burning the image into his mind and wanted to take possession of my pain as well. Once, he said, a hole had opened up in him where he had been pricked by a thorn. No, that's not right. You want to be useful to someone. That's why. They're the same thing, aren't they? We love because we want to be loved in return. If you want to know the meaning of life, ask the dead. We living have to struggle in ignorance. Again, did I miss a page? Just checking. Nope, okay, because sometimes I turn the page and now I'm worried sometimes. I used to think like that. I'm all alone, just like you. I'll always be alone. And I thought I was doing it to make somebody else happy. But now I think I was wrong. This child and his enigma seemed so out of place amidst the carnage around him that it was almost hard to believe he was real. Koharu regarded him warily. He scared me, for no reason so much as he reminded me of my childhood self. As Koharu's battle had played out, the evacuees had thinned from around us until none were left at all. Now the dim hallway was enveloped in an eerie silence, lit only by the emergency lighting operating at its independent power supply. Hoped Kareen and Koyu had managed to find a way to escape. The way ahead of me grew brighter. The end of the passageway was near now. I could see where the arches opened up to the outside. There's an exit right there, and yet they all ran the other way. That could only mean one thing. The presence alone told me that I was right. Koharu, too, couldn't possibly have missed it. The approach of someone who commanded such overwhelming amount of mana. It's them. The magic user, she's a caster. The entrance hall was strewn with debris and possessions toppled or left behind. The afternoon sunlight streamed in through the open doorway, and beyond a servant walked barefoot towards us. Her hair was pure white. Her skin was deepest ebony. Behind her, as she might a tote bag, she dragged the 3 corpses of 3 unlucky citizens. It did not take much to surmise that this was our enemy. No, not a caster, I'm afraid. A sorceress, although I don't care for the difference. She walked with a strangely fluid, viscid motion, but her voice had a young girl's sweetness. The short cape slung over her shoulder was dyed in garish primary colors and patterned in African fashion, while golden jewelry adorned her torso and legs. In one hand she carried a blade of absurd, outlandish design, and as we watched, she set it to one of the corpse's forearms and severed its hand from its body. Or rather, severed its command seals from its body. Just look at the two of you. What a pair you make. She moved on to the next, and then the next. Then, with her task complete, she began to collect the severed arms, her eyes trained on us all the while. It's her. She's the command seal hunter. The command shields she had taken now dangled from her shoulders, her cape, her arms, still emblazoned upon the body parts that bore them. There were hands and ankles and extracted collarbones among the grotesque display. I could even make out entire shrunken heads, their mouths sewn shut with thread. Mosaic City's distinctive command seal designs were plain to see upon the fresher-looking articles. You aren't even human, are you, girl? You're homunculus, barely alive, even with that heroic spirit bound to you. Well, I suppose your command seals are as good as anybody else's. Koharu? So you really are? Her gaze, at least I assume she was female, turned to me and she scrutinized me intently. And you? Oh my. Just what are you? Her eyes, as fiercely red as rubies, widened in surprise. Behind her, the corpses whose arms she'd taken rose unsteadily to their feet, and I suddenly realized that this area around us was littered with dead bodies, the remains of those whose frantic flight for the exit had come too late. No! I froze at the sight of a school uniform among them. Wait, it's not Kareen. Thank goodness. Anyway, it must be her. This servant is the one responsible for all those murders. The walking corpse's empty eyes trained on us, and they lurched toward us at a half-run, hands outstretched and grasping. I grabbed Prawn and ushered him back behind me. Koharu stepped forward to engage the advancing horde. She sent some of the dead flying away with explosive kicks and coolly sliced the limbs from others to rend them harmless. It was as though our enemy was watching to see how we would react. I can't hold myself back anymore, Reese. Please, let me fight her. You saw what she did to our comrades. Okay. Sometimes they don't... And I'll say this. This is, I think, a problem with a lot of light novels that I've read. They don't always say who's speaking. There are multiple characters in the room. And, I mean, I can use context clues. But it's also nice to just be told who's speaking sometimes. Or at least do it. It says, from the girl before me, I felt both a raging desire to fight and the crackle of raging mana. There we go. Come, face me. You can't ignore this fight forever. Oh no, she sounded almost bored. Dang, I read that wrong. As she sent corpse after corpse shambling after us. Her taunts were for me and me alone. She ignored Koharu as though she weren't even there at all. Are you not yet entertained? How demanding you are. Perhaps playing a while longer with my dear children will ease your boredom. In answer to her call, more dead bodies appeared from farther down the passage. 2 war elements, draped in chainmail, both of their feet were dyed red with blood and gore. I can only imagine how many people had met horrifying deaths beneath their weight. My, an African of the... an elephant of the African forests and an African of the Indus. Such a rare sight, aren't you honored? Once these giant beasts had terrorized the Roman Republic. Now they were servants of a sort under the command of Hannibal. That they were yet to disappear suggested that Hannibal may still be alive, but I had no idea what to make of their blind obedience they displayed toward our foe. Koharu gulped as they neared. She knew their formidable strength better than most. She looked back at me as she readied her sword. I could feel her mana building even as she whispered. I'm going to use my noble phantasm. I need to end this in one. Think again. The enemy's servant leaned forward into a crouch, and I heard the swish of movement. Almost before the sound reached my ear, she was before Kohaku, swinging her outlandish sword. The blow to her flank sent the tall knight flying. She smashed through the wall of the arena like a pile driver, coming to rest half buried in fallen rubble. I suppose servants don't die so easily. I'd hoped to take the right hand of yours, though. Would have done, too, if you had been a second slower. I leveled my Freischütz at her, but Koharu beat me to the punch. Before I could fire, she broke from her prison in a burst of debris and streaked toward her foe, who caught the blow in her misshapen blade. The shockwave rocked the arena. Koharu's battle against the Matsura warlord had been stunning, but this opponent was in a different league. The servant fought almost hunched double, with one hand flicked her sword this way and that, beating back Koharu's strikes with savage blows of her own. As her enemy lifted her long sword above her head, she seized her chance, sending the knight flying across the arena once more. Oh no. Koharu's arc ended abruptly as she crashed into the sharp corner of a wall. She vomited blood. This sad little girl couldn't finish off Hannibal when she had the chance. I wonder how many people he went and killed after that. Such a shame. Imagine the guilt she must feel. This was a caster? This woman? This was hardly even a battle, and her mana had not even reached its fullest peak. What the hell's Galahad doing in there? Oh, we get... Okay. We do get to see both of them here in this design. Very cool. Oh, and that's not the end of the chapter? 166. Wait, where's 165? Oh, that is 165. Okay. That's an interesting Galahad design. Yeah, the two swords is interesting for sure. I like that. And this is the servant, huh? Okay, I was expecting someone a lot older. From the, then again, that's the art style maybe. But, okay. Galahad's current circumstances might have been unusual, but he was still a knight of the Round Table. Seeing him overwhelmed, even toyed by an opponent with no business even lifting his sword, couldn't help but doubt his qualifications as a heroic spirit. Oh, little doe, such sprightly legs you have. With a pitter-patter of bare feet on stone, the enemy servant sprinted for where Koharu lay. The fallen knight's attempts to struggle to her feet were thwarted by a merciless foot brought down on her right arm. That outlandish sword followed a second later, pinning the arm to the floor. It was still attached, but only barely. Ha 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 ha! I can't do laughs. Koharu's agonized screams were barely audible above the sneering laughter. Ha ha ha! Ha! The enemy servant's cackling stopped, cut short as my unerring Freischütz struck her square in the back. This arcane bullet was the weapon of Samiel, the Black Huntsman. It would pierce the saint graph of any servant of Mosaic City, bringing immediate dissolution. It struck true. I saw it, but the bullet simply passed gently from her back, through her mana-woven body, to be pushed out through her chest on the other side. It had fallen harmlessly to the ground with a clatter, without even drawing a single drop of blood. In her stead, one of the articles dangling from her cowl, a bundle of collarbones, crumbled to dust. Slowly, she turned around. Must you be so eager to rush to death? Don't count me out so easily! Despite the sword pinning her arm to the ground, Koharu made to grab at the legs. She received a kick to the face for her trouble, followed by more cruel stamps for good measure. Koharu, damn it! I'm afraid that my dear children have matters to attend to on the far side of the citadel at the moment. Our foes have sealed the exits, it seems, and are fighting hard to last the siege. My children are inside their walls, you see. I cannot imagine they will last long. The servants of the city are also terribly frail, don't you agree? You mean there are still citizens left in here? Ones who didn't evacuate? Once my family has grown large enough, the time will come to fly the nest. Then our fun will really begin. She's going for this entire town. So what's her plan right now? Stay here and gather her strength? There was a little doubt about it. I was facing a being once worshipped as a deity, now summoned as a servant, a divine spirit. However, if it had been summoned by the Grail, there must be limits to the status it could attain. Don't let her intimidate you, Arish. She's not a real god. I tried to reassure myself. Perhaps it amounted to nothing more than making myself feel better, but I couldn't afford the slightest hesitation in the coming battle. I'm gonna be real, I don't know any of the gods that be related to, like, voodoo, so I know nothing about African gods, so I'm not even gonna warrant a guess. It's not even worth it. I swung my raised arm down, and the gnarled black branch extended from my hand grew into a vicious whip. Cool, cool. Oh, you got like Necrid powers, right? You can kind of morph it into stuff. That's cool. It extended 3, 4, 5-fold as it drew figure 8 patterns in the air. Its flicking tip traveled faster than sound. I closed a few paces and lashed out. My enemy moved not an inch as my whip streaked across her chest, only slightly grazing her. I had chosen to avoid going for a fatal blow, but it still had an effect. The tip of my branch just barely touched her cape, and the arms she held crossed within, slicing open her flesh, or as much as servants had flesh. My. Maybe my defenses won't be much use against you after all. What was that? Imaginary numbers, magecraft, perhaps? Whatever it was, I was told nothing of it. What secrets have you kept from me, I wonder? Oh. Does that mean that the black branch there? Oh, wait. Does that mean that, like, wait, hold up. I'm just trying to think here. If it's imaginary numbers, and it's black, and it's like a whip, does she have the same... Whoop, that was a weird thing. Does she have the same powers as, like, Dark Sakura? Because Dark Sakura is based on imaginary number magecraft, right? And, like, the way that her magic is working, the corrupting... Oh my god. Is this just, like, Dark Sakura magic, pretty much? Interesting. Okay. That's intriguing. That is really intriguing. Okay, let's keep reading here. It's working. Whatever defenses she's using, they don't work against my branch. You aren't a master, are you, girl? A spellcaster, perhaps? In any case, if you have no command seals, I have no use for you, and that means I need no longer put up with you. Interesting. So I'm just trying to think, though, like, if it's imaginary numbers, and she's using the Freyschütz, which is like an upgraded, like, Gander? Does that mean, like, is she, like, Rin or Sakura combined in this world? I mean, not exactly, but I mean, like, kind of from a thing. I don't know. I'm really curious. We'll have to see. Oh my god, wait, the dark spirits that invade her every night. Aren't those, like... Oh, aren't those, like, the ones that Sakura has? The little dudes? Maybe. We'll have to see. Despite the threat in her words, she made no motion to beckon the war elephants closer. It was clear that she still regarded me with curiosity, and therein lay my best chance of victory. If she wanted to know what I was, I would show her. Imaginary numbers? I should be so lucky. Okay, never mind. I was wrong. I should have read further. I am hardly qualified for that. The boy was a safe enough distance behind me now. I was going to make him watch me kill again. The evil spirits exulted at the prickle of sadism within my breast. It's not a branch or a scythe I need. It's an axe. An axe to destroy. An axe to rend. A call upon spirits starved of such impulses. I transformed the branch wrapped around my forearm into an enormous double-headed battle axe, gargantuan enough to cover one of my arms entirely, and I allowed the evil spirits even deeper into myself. The evil spirits that called out to me ever since I was young, At that age, I could not tell the difference between them and the people around me. I doubt I could even tell the difference between the clamor of their countless voices and the sound of my own thoughts. There was never a minute, never a second of the day where they were not by my side. I was a peaceful, comforting refuge on their long, dark road. They were neither heroic spirits nor anti-heroes. They were dread spirits, the souls of the dead steeped in hatred and loathing. They had no fame to boast of. They had no glory or notoriety to their name. None had given themselves to acts of infamy that would echo beyond their lifetimes. They were nothing more or less than evil in purest form, misbegotten creatures that the throne of heroes spat upon. Oh, so they're everyone else that doesn't get to go in. Okay. They had been given the gift of life, and yet they had been rejected by the world, stripped of even their names, and in the end, denied their place in the natural cycle. To those lost souls who so craved a return to flesh and blood, I, Utsumi Aris, was the one and only candle in the dark. I was on the verge of losing my sense of self when the two of them saved me. They taught me how to survive the curse I lived, at least for a little longer. Take control, Aris, they told me. Grasp the throttle and bend them to your will. Then I could fly swift and sure, even in the darkest night. To these spirits that wounded me so sorely, they taught me to become mother and bestowed upon them a name. Erkhem. The Great Hazel, the king of the Fae, beckoned with crown and tail. Lord of the Fae. Like fairies? Huh. Okay. Lord of the Willis, those graceful nymphs of the Silver Willows, and gatekeeper of the kingdom of that. Okay, that's what I'm going to look up after. For this bow is the touch of the Errol King's hand. I've never heard of that. He who laughs at those spirits who strut proudly across this world, they think of their own. He whose grasp drags them from their horses. Lay waste. With such tempting prey before them, the evil spirits acceded eagerly to my command. My black battle axe wailed mournfully as it swung through the air, its edge keen enough to slice a soul in twain. The strike sent the enemy's servant's outlandish blade spinning through the air. And then I stepped in and brought my weapon's weight back down in a second blow. My. Her wound was deep, stretching from shoulder to breast, and through the deep slash I could see the stark white of flesh and fat. Wonderful girl, truly wonderful. A display worth at least a shrunken head. Who would have guessed your powers would be equal in kind to those of Nizambi? Her true name freely given. Perhaps this was the closest she had come to unreserved praise. I had heard of Nizambi just about. She was the origin of all zombie folklore, the high goddess of the Vili people of the Congo, and once a great empress and the mother of all life. For both of us wield death. Oh boy. Okay, that's kind of sick. That's kind of a sick look, actually. And so she's not a caster, she's a sorceress, but that means she could be any class, but that's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to head to Google because I want to look up a couple of these things. So first off, can I copy and paste that? Can I read? Nope. Okay, I'm Googling this. Errol Koenig. Okay. Is a poem written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. It depicts a child assailed by a supernatural king, being the Erlking, a king of fairies. It was written as part of a 1782 Singspiel, Die Frischerin, is Goethe's most famous ballad. Okay. So it's a character from a poem, and the Errol King. European folklore and myth, the Errol King is a sinister elf who lingers in the woods. He stalks children who stay in the woods for too long and kills them by a single touch. So very Zelda. King of the Elves, essentially. Interesting. And I scroll down and I see Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and I'm looking at something else. Okay. List of works based on the Erlking is games? No. Is there anything here for prose fiction? Look, there's nothing added for... It's not there for Fate Requiem. Someone's got to add that. not going to be me. Okay, so that's interesting. That's interesting. The other one is, let's look up Nzambi. I think I'm saying that right. How do I say that? Oxford Dictionary. Oh, I love how I scroll down and it's, again, the Type Moon Wiki is right there. God of the Bakongo people. Nzambi is self-existence, almighty, and knows all. Okay, so this is like a high god. This isn't like just the god of zombies, right? This is the god of like everything. Interesting. So yeah, Nzambi is the Congo word for God, period. Oh, that's powerful. Okay. And, well, I guess Nzambi, okay. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. So Nzambi becomes zombie, right? Because you can say it in how it's said. But it's the related to Zumbi, which means fetish, not like that version. But I'm talking about an object used for magical powers, right? And Nzambi meaning God. Okay. Interesting. Okay. And again, right in as I look it up, I think just Google knows who I am now because all I see is the Fate stuff there. Neat stuff. Okay. Well, that is then the end of this chapter here. We're going to be moving on to chapter 6 in not too long here. I'm very excited because we're getting close to the end, right? We're getting close to the end of book 1, which is where officially we can say, hey, we've read up to where we're prepared for in the really close approaching Fate event. I'll probably get it at least started before I head on in, but yeah, thank you all for watching with me, and we'll see you next time for some more of our reading as we move on to chapter 6. Just as a look here, I'm just going to leave a bookmark here. So we're on page 171. If I go to first, let's see here. Well, first off, again, we'll take a brief look at some of these characters because now we can see more of them. God, again, I've seen her design in Grand Order, and I'm like, what have they done? I love Iris's design here. Yeah, these two are still about the same. This one's still very low quality, but yeah, he does have 2 swords. I'm just noticing that. And yeah, it's pretty much his armor but boobed up, which is sure, okay. But what I wanted was not this, but rather just specifically... okay, so it's 8 chapters, and honestly, we're just about done. Chapter 7 is like Mundo short. It might even be the end next time, right? Because we're on 171. Yeah, we're nearly there. We might even finish it next time. We'll see. We'll see how long it takes. But yeah, thank you all for watching, guys. We'll see you next time for maybe the conclusion, maybe not. We'll see. I don't know. It'd probably be, honestly. Probably. But we'll see you then for that, guys. Ciao. You can push yourself to and be strong, with me. You can fly and run away, but with me comes your and jealousy. I got you when the going gets rough, yo. No, watch this stuff, 'cause this love, you may feel like...